Far overseas an island is, whereon when day is done, a grove of tossing palms are printed on the sun. And all about the reefy shore blue breakers flash and fall. There shall I go, methinks, when I am done with all. That poem was written by Robert Louis Stevenson about a South Pacific island just like this.
It's one of a group of islands known as Samoa, which has charmed and fascinated explorers and missionaries since contact was first made. In the Western mind, South Sea islands regularly conjure up images of paradise, places where an idyllic climate is matched by a relaxed and harmonious pattern of life. And it's a pattern that has usually been seen as better than life back home. For most of us, these are idle reflections, holiday thoughts before returning to the stresses and strains of everyday life. But for a young American anthropologist called Margaret Mead, the suggestion that life out here had less of that stress and strain was an important one. In 1925, she came here to Tau Island to make, in her own words, a psychological study of primitive youth for Western civilization. She wanted to know if adolescence was always a time of turmoil. Her findings were the start of her fame as the most widely read and the best known anthropologist of all time.
When I was a small child, my mother was studying Italian immigrants in the United States. So I grew up with a general interest.
This is Barnard College in New York City. In 1923, Margaret Mead graduated here in a ceremony that's changed very little from the one you see going on today. Throughout her life, she had a kind of curiosity that enabled her to ask a whole set of questions that normally just don't occur to most of us. They were questions that were important for anthropology and interesting to the general public.
This scene causes few surprises for anyone who lives in the West. But of course, there are many interesting questions that can be asked. First of all, why have a ceremony? Why don't the girls just go home at the end of their last academic term and receive their diplomas by post? Why give certificates at all? Why are they all wearing the same clothes? And why are they so different from the ones that they'd normally wear every day of the week?
Important questions, and they're difficult ones to answer. Social events like these don't seem strange to us when they're part of our own culture. It's only other people's rites and ceremonies that seem odd and bizarre, so much so that we often forget that we ourselves have elaborate and formal and equally strange rites of our own.
Mead had originally come to Barnard to study psychology, but her curiosity was aroused by the popular lectures of the great American anthropologist Franz Boas. He had broken new ground by actually working in the field with the cultures he studied, and he encouraged his students to do the same.
I think she was a very remarkable young person who had decided that she was going to show that a woman, as well as a man, could do field work in anthropology. She wanted her own people, and that meant that she was not going to work with American Indians, where Boas wanted her to start to work. She wanted to go to a very remote place. Of course, that made it more dramatic. Well, Boas suggested that she go to American Samoa, where a boat came in every 3 weeks, and there could be communication. Well, she bucked against that a little bit, but she finally accepted it because she knew perfectly well she wouldn't go any place if Boas wouldn't let her go.
Throughout her career, Mead was intrigued by the key stages that all humans pass through as they're born into and grow up in their own cultures. Boaz was at the centre of the nature-nurture debate, the question of whether your race or your culture makes you into what you are. He wanted Mead to study one particular period of life when these biological and social aspects caused most conflict: adolescence.
I wanted to study change. I wanted to find out in a society that was changing whether people felt more strongly about new things or old things. My professor wanted me to study adolescence. I wanted to come to Polynesia somewhere. He wanted me to stay in the United States. So we made an exchange. He said I could come to Polynesia if I'd study the adolescent girl. Most of the gloom about adolescence had come from Germany. They had these terrible words like Weltschmerz, world pain. So that everywhere in the world you were supposed to have an awful time growing up. Nobody knew anything about adolescence in Samoa or Hawaii or the Marquesas or Tahiti. We didn't know anything.
Margaret Mead came out here to investigate adolescence in a society completely different from her own. Her findings were startling. Adolescence was known in America and Europe as a period of emotional stress and personal conflict. Now, if these problems were caused by biological changes, and many at the time believed that they were, then they should be found in human societies all over the world. But here in Samoa, Mead found that adolescence was, in many ways, the most enjoyable and happy time of life. There were many reasons for this. For a start, she found that the culture itself was pretty relaxed and casual. Then there was the whole system of child rearing with its lack of harsh punishment and the large number of adults a child could turn to. The other important reason was the general acceptance of sexual relations between adolescents. Sex was seen as something to be enjoyed in quantity as well as quality before you chose a partner for life. Do girls here have sex with their boyfriends at your age?
No. No.
None of the girls?
No.
No.
We don't know about us.
Some. Is it, do you consider it wrong because the church says so?
Yeah.
No. Consider it wrong. But it's really up to the girl.
You can hardly find girls like that here.
You don't. But Margaret Mead said that girls did it when they wanted to before they got married, and with who they wanted to.
Yeah, it depends.
Maybe that was long ago, but nowadays it's changed. There's a big change in Samoa.
Mead was one of the first women to go into the field as an anthropologist. In later life, she remembered what a daunting task this was for a young woman of 23.
I think my first field trip was, in a sense, the most difficult because I did a kind of work nobody had done then. So there weren't any models at all. I was just told not to waste my time doing conventional things and that I was to learn the language and get acquainted with the adolescent girls and find out what they were up to. I'd never eaten any food except American food, and I had to learn to eat Samoan food. And also there weren't any styles of work then. In Samoa I learned to dance and learned to talk a very elegant language, and in return for the help they gave me, I conformed to many of the styles of their society.
Against the developing trend in anthropological fieldwork methods, Mead chose not to immerse herself entirely in Samoan culture. But she did spend most of her day with the adolescent girls that she was to make famous. Because there was a well-established mission on the island, some of the girls spoke English, and several of them became close friends, which helped her build up a detailed portrait of Samoan adolescence. Those girls that Mead studied are now the elders of Tau Island. It was their answers to her questions about life and love and fidelity that were to have such an impact on the people back home. Some of her subjects still remember those questions.
Ya, nafsiri mai lole te mai ta e ati awa o te mitonu ala va na va fu lava la sunga ma malu tinao tanga tama siri mai va fu ya o fai so mai masina o la tali ya ele ya se be fa pena ya e nafsiri mai la ya ta fa ele ya se tama o sa ya ulanga la ya onga ile lo ya ile la stina o lava na ya o ya la o ya la e ku u mati ni tu ai fale sawa o no futu mawa ya solmona masel ile la vestala na wale sa ya la no futu mawa mar tamalale o mautuf sa man no foi I fa au la.
Mead's findings were published in her first book, Coming of Age in Samoa. But there are some problems with her account of life in Samoa in the 1920s. Critics have claimed that she missed certain important aspects of Samoan life. She spent only 6 months on Tau Island, most of that time living with an American family rather than amongst the Samoan people. This has made people wonder whether she could have really grasped the full complexity of Samoan culture and whether, for that matter, she could have fully mastered the unusually difficult Samoan tongue.
Asking people about personal and intimate areas of their lives is not easy even in your own language. What can be said is that Mead was certainly struck by the differences between adolescents in Samoa and America. Whether she knew enough about Samoan life to be sure that those stresses and strains were really absent is a question that anthropologists are still arguing about today.
Mead did not report her findings in the usual academic fashion. Her book was written for the general reader.
In those days, anthropologists used to pepper their pages with language that nobody spoke. If I'd used words like exogamy and endogamy and things like that, they couldn't have read the book. So I wrote it in English for the people I thought would use it. And if you write a book for people who are going to use something, you write it for the whole world.
Maybe